Her response to a divine call out of her private sector after just 9 months of employment birthed an unexpected love for teaching and public service. Ms. Brown credits her faith in God, the legacy of her parents, who are both educators, and the mentorship received at the Gingerland Seventh-day Adventist Church and at the Gingerland Secondary School while teaching there as a collective catalyst for her personal and professional growth. Along her life's journey, Ms. Brown is grateful for the opportunities to improve her knowledge and skills, often in new and interesting places. Some of these said opportunities has resulted in Ms. Brown attaining the following: a bachelor's degree of art degree in Spanish from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill Campus, Barbados, and several other diplomas including Diploma in Protocol and Diplomacy from the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean, University of the West Indies, Diploma in Methodologies for Teaching Spanish as a Second Language for Teachers of the English-Speaking Caribbean, sponsored by AGCID Chile, Chilean Cooperation for Development, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Certificate in Mandarin Studies, Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of China on Taiwan Scholarship, and an international training course for the young diplomats, Diplomatic Academy of Chile, Andres Bello, and among others, several others, mostly offered to the Ministry of Human Resources of the Division Island Administration. After 15 rewarding years as a teacher of modern languages and business, Ms. Brown was transferred to the Premier's ministry, where she worked as a protocol officer for several years. Presently, Ms. Brown occupies the role of Assistant Secretary in the Premier's Ministry of the Nevis Island Administration. She eagerly awaits the next assignment on her father's agenda for his humble, though sometimes renegade daughter. Thank you, and please help me welcome Ms. Sherna Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Michael Harold Sutton Auditorium of the Nevis Performing Arts Center for this highly anticipated final evening of the 54th Annual Leeward Islands Debating Competition. Before we begin, what promises to be an exciting evening of stimulating debate, I must recognize the presence of the Honorable Mark A.G. Brantley, Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Eric Evelyn, Deputy Premier of Nevis. I see the Honorable Troy Leeward, Minister with responsibility for education, information technology, library services, youth and sports. Mrs. Helen Lewis, legal advisor. I see the Honorable Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, member of the opposition in the Nevis Island Assembly. I recognize senior civil servants in the audience, hardworking staff of the Ministry of Education, esteemed adjudicators, auditors, timekeeper teams, coaches, supporters, members of the media. Good evening, all. I am your moderator for this evening, Ms. Sherna Brown. Please excuse me. I mean no bias by having on my yellow blouse. I had a little wardrobe malfunction and had to shift. Okay, but yellow is a significant color in each of our national flags. Okay, so we find some common ground there. Ladies and gentlemen, as anxious as you may be to witness this grand finale, please indulge me as I tarry a while longer at the lectern to remind us of the official procedures of the Leeward Islands debating competition that will again govern the proceedings for this evening's debate. I give a reminder to the audience that in keeping with the rules of the competition, All contributions should be directed through the moderator. Anyone engaging during this session is asked to respond respectfully to the arguments presented rather than addressing the debaters personally. Let us maintain the spirit of intellectual exchange and mutual respect that underpins this competition. You have already been asked, please, to keep your phone on silent, and I ask you to be in silent mode as the debaters present. I welcome the presence of the Honorable Spencer Brand and Mrs. Brand, and we continue with the rules for this evening. Each team consists of 2 speakers, a leader and a second speaker. The moot for tonight's debate is, Caribbean government should provide free tertiary education up to the undergraduate degree level. Tonight's debate will be judged based on the following criteria. Prepared speech, 100 points. Soundness of speech, 35 points. Logical development, 20 points. Audibility and clarity, 15 points. Posture and personality, 15 points. Command of material, 15 points. Rebuttal, the points are broken down as follows. Team coordination, 10 points. General analysis of debate, 14 points. Recall of points, 10 points. Ability to refute points, 20 points. Spontaneity, 6 points. This gives a maximum total score of 780 points per team. That's the maximum total that each team can score. The best speaker for the debate and the overall best speaker of the competition will be determined by 2 special judges. I will now introduce the debating teams for tonight. The proposition team, representing Nevis, I welcome to the stage Speaker 1, the leader of the proposition, Shermaya Thompson. Speaker number 2 for the proposition, Rajon Fifield. Representing Team Antigua, the opposition team, we call to this stage leader of the opposition, Leanna Brown. Speaker number 2, we welcome to the stage for the opposition, Janika Adams. Janika Adams, welcome to the stage. I will now introduce to you our adjudicators for this evening. Joy Napier. Joy Napier is an accomplished educator, youth leader, and a social entrepreneur dedicated to advancing education and civic engagement in the Caribbean. She is the founder and the principal of Nevis International Secondary School, the island's only private secondary institution, where she has promoted inclusive, student-centered learning for over a decade. A former National Youth Ambassador to CARICOM, she represented the interests of thousands of young people in a regional policy dialogue. A Chevening scholar, she holds a Master of Science with distinction in International Development from the University of Edinburgh and a bachelor's degree in Political Science from Wellesley College. Her work spans social enterprise and youth voter mobilization initiatives across the Caribbean. She brings a global outlook, a sharp analytical insight, and deep commitment to youth empowerment to her role as an adjudicator this evening. Let us welcome Ms. Joy Napier. Mrs. Gail Gray Phillip. Mrs. Gail Gray Phillip is a seasoned educator who has served the University of the West Indies Global Campus in several leadership roles. She previously held the position of Head of Site for St. Kitts and Nevis and currently serves as Acting Deputy Director for the UWI Global Campus sites. In this capacity, she oversees the strategic direction and growth of over 30 sites across 16 Caribbean countries, ensuring that residents continue to benefit from high-quality education and training programs. Mrs. Gray Phillip has fulfilled all the requirements for a PhD in education and is awaiting the formal conferral of the degree. Let us welcome Mrs. Gail Gray Phillip. Mrs. Susan Nisbet. Mrs. Susan Nisbet served the Department of Education for 34 years as a teacher of English. She became synonymous with the Gingerland Secondary School, where her duties extended beyond the classroom. As head of the English department, she was very passionate about the teaching of prose in its various forms and ensured that students created masterpieces for their SBA oral presentations. During her tenure as teacher, she was also very instrumental in creating and assisting students to create winning entries for various essay and speech competitions. Although retired from the classroom, Mrs. Nisbet's love for the written and spoken word is the compelling force that drives her to seize opportunities like this to nurture her love. We welcome Mrs. Susan Nisbet. Our best speaker judges, in case anyone would have missed it, we have Miss Midge A. Morton, who is co-founder and the managing director of Morton Robinson LP, a boutique law firm located in the Federation. The firm is recognized for its specialization in immigration, corporate, and commercial law. Midge received her education in the West Indies, earning an LLB from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill Campus, Barbados. She also holds an LEC from the Distinguished Normal Manley Law School at the Mona campus in Jamaica. She was called to the bars of St. Kitts and Nevis in 2006 and Anguilla in 2009. In addition to her legal practice, Midge serves as a notary public. We welcome again Ms. Midge Morton. Mrs. Jasmine Doe holds a bachelor's in English with over 28 years of distinguished service in education. Mrs. Doe built a career dedicated to shaping young minds and fostering academic excellence. As a former principal, she led with vision, integrity, and commitment to student success. Following retirement from education, Mrs. Doe transitioned into the financial services sector and is now a licensed insurance sales consultant with National Caribbean Insurance. This role reflects her adaptability and continued dedication to serving the community, helping individuals and families secure financial protection and peace of mind. Bringing together decades of educational insight and current business acumen, Mrs. Doe offers a balanced perspective as a judge. Her background ensures fairness, thoughtful evaluation, and a commitment to recognizing excellence. We thank our judges our best speaker judges, and we thank you, Mrs. Dorr, for being here as well. All right, tonight's auditor, again, is PKF St. Kitts and Nevis. PKF St. Kitts and Nevis is a locally owned audit and accounting firm operating in St. Kitts and Nevis and is a proud member of PKF International, formerly Panel Kerr Foster. The firm's professionals bring strong credentials and practical expertise in accounting, external and internal audit, finance, AML, CFT, CPF, compliance, and advisory services. The representatives from PKF St. Kitts and Nevis tonight are Phoebe Blanco and Azelle Williams. Timekeeper, tonight's timekeeper is Miss Delcia Burke. Please give it up for all of our officials this evening. The debate tonight will proceed in the following order. We may know it by heart, but I will repeat. Leader of the opposition has 10 minutes to present their case. Leader of the opposition has 10 minutes to prepare their case, to present their case, sorry. The second speaker of the proposition will have 7 minutes to present his case, and the second speaker of the opposition will have 7 minutes to present her case. Now, after the prepared speeches, there will be 5 minutes of silence for rebuttal preparation. Please, I know the tension is high, but let us please honor the sanctity of the moment and be very quiet while the debaters prepare their rebuttals. The rebuttal speeches, the opposition rebuttal, they will have 5 minutes in which to make their case. The proposition will follow, again taking 5 minutes to present their case. The timekeeper will ring the bell 1 minute before the time expires, and again when the time has expired. Debaters are allowed a 10-second grace period to conclude. And so, without any further ado, I welcome to the podium the first speaker for the proposition from Team Nevis, Ms. Thompson.
Education is indispensable for the future of the Caribbean. A compelling observation by the Caribbean Development Bank. Moderator, esteemed judges, worthy opponents, colleague, astute audience, good evening. I rise in opposition to the moot. Caribbean government should provide free tertiary education for citizens up to the undergraduate degree level. Moderator, to properly ground this debate, permit me to define the key terms of our argument. UNESCO's Institute for Statistics defines free education as the years or grades in which children or young people are entitled to education, free of tuition fees. Tertiary education is defined in the CARICOM Human Resource Development 2030 Strategy document policy as vocational institutes, community colleges, polytechnics, and universities. The Oxford Dictionary defines a citizen as a person belonging to a state or country who has recognized their legal rights and duties. An undergraduate degree refers to the first university qualification, the bachelor's degree, the launching pad for professional life and national development, Britannica 2022. Reframed, the moot reads, governments in the Caribbean should remove tuition fees so that persons belonging to these states can access vocational institutes, community colleges, polytechnics, and universities up to the bachelor's degree. Moderator, I will address the moot through the lenses of breaking generational inequality, human capital and national development, and economic return. This moot demands more than theory. It is a practical strategy. Therefore, my colleague will present a practical, strategic implementation framework by which this commitment to addressing barriers will be honored. Moderator, I want you to think of someone that you know, perhaps a neighbor or a family member, or even someone who sat next to you in fifth form. Brilliant student, stellar performance in CSEC, earned a few grade ones. But when it was time to access free tertiary education, the money was not there. Parents could not afford fees. They had no land to use as collateral, so were ineligible for a student loan. Just like that, the door closed. That student is not an exception. That student is a recurring pattern. The reality, moderator, is that educational access in the Caribbean has been historically uneven, and socioeconomic backgrounds continue to greatly influence tertiary participation rates. A startling revelation was made by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, where in Jamaica, 8 out of every 10 Jamaicans aged 19 to 24 were not enrolled in tertiary education. In 2022, only 20% of 19 to 24-year-olds were enrolled, meaning 80% were not. Among 17 to 18-year-olds, non-enrollment rose from 32% in 2017 to 38% in 2021. Moderator, it was concluded that educations remain unequal, and the government intervention is necessary to expand opportunity and break generational inequality. Moderator, with a few exceptions, the Caribbean region cannot boast about extensive mineral resources. For many of us, especially the Leeward Islands, we cannot boast of significant landmass. However, our greatest competitive advantage has always been our people. The World Bank indicates that tertiary education is instrumental in fostering growth, reducing poverty, and boosting shared prosperity. The same source sadly states that tertiary education remains out of reach for many of the world's poorest and most marginalized. In Latin America and the Caribbean, on average, the poorest 50% of the population only represented 25% of tertiary education students in 2015. Moderator, Yui Mona Professor and Head of Caribbean Go Center for Educational Planning, Professor Canute Thompson highlighted that if citizens are to experience sustained and sustainable improvement in their quality of life, governments must invest in more tertiary education. There are already methods and models for subsidizing tertiary education in the Caribbean, moderator. In 2019, Dominica's government announced a policy for free tertiary education. Acting President of Dominica State College, Ms. Trudy Christian stated, "Our tertiary institutions are geared towards workforce development and producing the best possible workforce. The government assuming cost of tertiary education is the way to ensure that you have adequate human resource in the various sectors. Likewise, the Government Assistance for Tuition Expenses program in Trinidad and Tobago provides eligible citizens with free tuition for approved undergraduate programs. It was designed to enhance access to education and support the development of human capital in Trinidad and Tobago, permitting access to education for all. In 2022, Prime Minister Terence Drew of St. Kitts and Nevis announced at his inauguration ceremony that students of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College are to attend the institution tuition-free, sharing that the government could understand the predicament of students whose parents could not afford to pay. Moderator, Antigua's own Prime Minister, Honorable Gaston A. Brown, in his 2026 budget statement, declared that students at Antigua and Barbuda's College of Continuing Studies will enjoy tuition free. He vowed to provide easy access to post-secondary and university education to equip the next generation with skills, confidence, and creativity to shape the Antigua and Barbuda of tomorrow. Wow! What Antigua vows to practice at home, they protest here without persuasion. One may argue, moderator, that human capital can be actualized without free tertiary education up to the undergraduate degree level. But the reality is that our best needs access, and that access should not be restricted by socioeconomic variables. Our schools need qualified teachers. Our tourism sector needs trained managers. Climate change demands environmental experts. And our infrastructure certainly needs expert engineers. What we do not need is a system where the deciding qualification is your family's bank account balance. Talent should open the door, not your wallet. Moderator, this is not a cost-only conversation. Data shows that individuals with tertiary level credentials earn significantly more over their lifetime. UNESCO's Global Education Monitoring Report 2015 stated, every $1 invested in education and youth skills in developing countries generates $10 to $15 in economic growth. What does this mean for the Caribbean islands? Higher job creation and tax revenues, stronger consumer spending, more entrepreneurship, greater productivity, less crime, less economic stagnation. Moderator, I have established that the provisions of tertiary education to citizens, free of tuition fees, is both a moral obligation, which is rooted in the principle of equitable and sustainable Caribbean development, Caribbean societies, and a strategic implementation aligned with existing OECS commitments and CARICOM's Human Resource Development Strategy 2030. George Orwell warned us about societies that claim equality while quietly practicing inequality. In his book, Animal Farm, he wrote, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." When tertiary education is accessible to only those who can afford it, we send the same message. Education is for everyone, but in reality, it is for those who can pay. Moderator, I say, all in favor for free tertiary education, say aye. Those against, the ayes have it.
Thank you, leader of the proposition. You took 10 minutes and 6 seconds to present your argument. I now invite the leader of the opposition to present their debate.
Good policy is not built on emotions or votes. It is built on sustainability. Moderator, esteemed judges, my worthy opponents, members of our listening and viewing audience, a pleasant good evening. My colleague and I stand before you tonight to oppose the moot that Caribbean governments should provide free tertiary education to citizens up to the undergraduate degree level. While this proposal may sound compassionate, governments are not charities. They are stewards of limited resources. In small Caribbean states, every dollar must be spent wisely, responsibly, and sustainably. Promises that cannot be maintained do not empower citizens. They weaken institutions and strain economies. For these reasons, we firmly oppose the motion. Before we proceed further into tonight's debate, please permit me to define key terms for clarity. According to the World Bank, tertiary education refers to all formal post-secondary education. Free, as defined by the Oxford English Dictionary, is to be provided without cost or payment. In this context, it means tuition fully funded by the government with no financial contribution from the students. The University of Canterbury defines undergraduates as a degree, certificate, or diploma pursued at a university as the first level of study after completing secondary school. The Cambridge Dictionary defines the Caribbean as the countries and islands in and around the Caribbean Sea. The same source then defines government as an organization that officially manages or controls a country or region. Put simply, the motion reads, Caribbean government should assume full financial responsibility for tuition, excluding auxiliary costs, for citizens pursuing formal post-secondary education up to the bachelor's degree level, transferring that burden onto the states and ultimately onto our taxpayers. My colleague and I reject this proposal. As first speaker, I will focus on the financial realities, demonstrating that 1, free tertiary education is financially unsustainable for Caribbean governments, and 2, free tertiary education reflects poor prioritization and misallocation of limited public resources. My colleague would then examine the broader social and institutional consequences, showing how free tertiary education lowers quality, creates inefficiencies, and ultimately fails the very students it claims to support. Firstly, moderator, Caribbean governments simply cannot afford such a policy. Free tertiary education is financially unsustainable. At present, governments already guarantee free education at the primary and secondary levels, and even this represents a significant financial burden. If compulsory education is underfunded, why are we racing to expand optional education? According to Victoria Levin, a senior economist in the World Bank, she stated, and I quote, countries are not investing enough in capital expenditure or educational infrastructure. Schools are outdated and ill-equipped. Digital infrastructure is equally inadequate, with poor internet access and unequal access to digital devices, end quote. Moderator, should a leaking foundation be ignored simply to add another floor to the building? Expanding free access to tertiary education would require millions of additional dollars each year. Moreover, we must challenge the very idea of the word free. Does shifting the cost from student to the states magically make that cost disappear? As economist Milton Friedman reminds us, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Someone always pays. We must ask, if education is free for the students, who exactly is going to pay this bill? Is it the taxpayer, the healthcare system, or the child whose primary school still lacks basic resources? Citizens would ultimately bear the cost through higher taxes or reduced public services, funds needed for critical priorities like healthcare, hurricane preparedness, and climate resilience. These are not luxuries. They are necessities for survival in small Caribbean states. Additionally, when governments fund university education, they invest tax revenue to build human capital, expecting return through innovation, skilled labor, and taxes. However, many Caribbean graduates migrate to higher paying jobs abroad, limiting those returns. A 2024 IMF study entitled Emigration and Brain Drain, Evidence from the Caribbean, found that most Caribbean countries lose more than 50% of their workforce in the tertiary education segments, meaning free university often becomes less of an investment and more of a donation that boosts foreign economies instead of the local ones. However, this discussion is not new. Several Caribbean countries across the region have attempted free or heavily subsidized tertiary education, but later had to scale back or restructure because the financial burden proved unsustainable. In 2018, former Barbados Minister of Education, Ronald Jones, revealed that the government once paid $162 million towards UE fees, more than the combined expenditure for secondary, primary, and nursery education. Similarly, a 2023 study done by the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies found that Trinidad and Tobago could not afford to fully fund university education due to persistent budget deficits. If even stronger regional economies could not sustain free tertiary education, it is unrealistic to expect smaller, more vulnerable states to succeed. Moderator, let this be a lesson and a warning to all our Caribbean governments going down the rabbit hole of free tertiary education. Moderator, however, beyond cost, this policy also reflects poor prioritization of limited public resources. When did good governance become more about applause rather than accountability? Each year, CXC results reveal troubling performances, with many students leaving secondary school without the qualifications necessary to advance. A 2025 World Bank study on the Caribbean education system found that only 4.9% of students pass 5 or more subjects, including mathematics and English. The World Bank Director for Caribbean countries, Lilia Buranswick, went on to state, and I quote, "Just 36% of students passed mathematics in 2024, pointing to a larger systemic crisis in foundational learning in the Caribbean," end quote. This highlights a simple truth. The problem is not access to university. The problem is preparation before university. Why are we debating free university when many students cannot pass mathematics or English? What sense would it truly make to fund the finish line when many students have not arrived at the starting blocks? Finally, moderator, this policy is fundamentally inequitable and inefficient. Public spending on higher education often disproportionately benefits higher income groups unless financial aid is carefully targeted. In an article published in 2016 entitled "Who Would Benefit More from Free College?", Dr. Matthew Chinogos, Vice President for Education and Policy at the Urban Institute, stated, and I quote, "Families from the top half of the income distribution would receive 24% more in dollar value from eliminating tuition than families from the lower half," end quote. He went on to further explain that free tuition does not address non-tuition costs, which leaves families from the bottom half having to pay nearly $18 billion in college costs, meaning disadvantaged students still continue to struggle with things like transportation, meals, housing, and basic resources. That is not fairness. That is poor targeting of scarce public funds. A smarter and more responsible approach is targeted support through scholarships, grants, and mean-tested assistance that directly help those who truly need it while maintaining quality and fiscal stability. Moderator, when we strip away the emotion and examine reality, the truth becomes clear. This policy is too costly to sustain. If Caribbean governments are already struggling to fund classrooms and textbooks, where will the millions for university tuition suddenly come from? Will money fall from the sky? Or will it be taken from somewhere else? Nothing is truly free. Good intentions do not balance budgets. Emotion does not pay tuition bills, and unsustainable policy is not leadership. The opposition is not against education. We are against pretending that economics do not exist. Therefore, we stand in firm opposition to the moot. I thank you.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. You spoke for 10 minutes and 3 seconds. Allow me, please, to acknowledge the presence of Her Honor Mrs. Hailita Leeward, OBE, MH, our Deputy Governor General on the island of Nevis. I'm not seeing you up front, but I'm told that you're somewhere in the audience. A reminder, please, our learned audience, to remain silent during the debate presentations. I thank you for your cooperation. I now invite to the lectern the second speaker for the proposition.
Moderator, esteemed judges, opponents, colleague, my worthy opponents, good evening. My colleague has effectively shown why Caribbean governments should provide free tertiary education to citizens up to the undergraduate degree level. My task is to show how this can be done sustainably, effectively, and strategically. In the article dubbed 5 Reasons Why College Should Be Free by University of the People, an accredited university that offers free tuition to all students, it was highlighted that tuition-free college has clear benefits, but at the same time, funding and quality must be managed carefully to ensure the programs are sustainable, equitable, and efficient. Moderator, we are not proposing that Caribbean governments say abracadabra and poof, instant transformation. Instead, we submit a structured and strategic framework which includes strategic implementation and tiered access, service bonds and retention, and fiscal safeguards. Caribbean islands are diverse in size, fiscal capacity, existing infrastructure, and strategic priorities. Therefore, we propose a phased and adaptable framework that operates through 3 tiers of implementation. Tier 1, immediate. Tier 2, progressive. And Tier 3, regional. Tier 1 provides immediate free access to students pursuing studies in national priority fields aligned with each country's national development strategy. Yes, moderator, the priority list will differ in Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, or Grenada, but one constant remains: feels critical to national development. Importantly, moderator, this will not create economic shock. Most Caribbean governments already fund scholarships in priority areas through national programs, regional partnerships, or international agreements that offer scholarships such as Chevening, Taiwanese, Moroccan, Cuban, OAS, and United Nations. The list is endless, moderator. Tier 2 follows within 5 years, expanding access from priority fields to all undergraduate programs offered at public regional institutions, except where the program is unavailable in the region. These phased expansions give governments time to strengthen budgets, time to expand institutional capacity, time to implement safeguards, and time to make responsible fiscal decisions. Moderator, this is not a leap into uncertainty. It is a planned expansion of opportunity. Tier 3 is a regional cooperation, as the future of Caribbean education must be built through collaboration. Moderator, other regions already demonstrated this approach. Through the Erasmus Plus framework, The European Union supports student mobility, shared funding, and institutional partnerships across countries. The Caribbean can adopt a similar cooperative model. Tier 3, therefore, is sequenced, sensible, evidenced pathway. Moderator, the framework also addresses service bonds and retention. Opponents of free tertiary education often cite brain drain, the fear that graduates will leave and never return. This concern is a legitimate, moderator, but it is not an argument against the policy. It is an argument for structuring it wisely and not theoretically. An article published by Harvard Kennedy School, Brain Drain, Does Tying College to Residency Keep Graduates in State, notes that recipients of free tertiary education in New York must remain in the state after graduation for the same period of time that they received funding, or the scholarship converts into a loan. Moderator, despite decades of embargo and isolation, Cuba chose to educate its people. Education is free up to the postgraduate level. Many of our healthcare systems have been sustained by Cuban-trained professionals. Many of our doctors are Cuban-trained. To counteract brain drain, graduates repay that investment through structured social service. This is not an absence of responsibility. It is education tied to national development. This policy does not lose talent. It secures it, strengthens it, and ensures a return on investment. From brain drain to brain gain. Moderator, preventing education to avoid brain drain is like refusing to plant crops because some of them may be exported. Moderator, previously, pursuing tertiary education meant paying not only tuition, but also travel, accommodation, and abroad meal plans. That landscape has changed dramatically. Online programs now allow students to study from the comfort of their homes, eliminating additional cost. The expansion of University of the West Indies into a global campus means that access to tertiary education is closer to our citizens than ever before. It is a new reality. Removing tuition costs becomes not only feasible, but transformative. Moderator, investment in education yields far greater return than its cost. The real danger is the alternative. A generation locked out of learning, a workforce trapped in mediocrity, rising youth unemployment, rising crime for socially stunted and frustrated youths, persistent skills shortages, and expanding social assistance burdens. Ultimately, paying for the consequences of undereducation instead of investing in opportunity. The vision has been presented. The path has been charted. What remains now is the courage to act. Let us not choose the path of fear when the road of opportunity lies before us. Let us instead have, in the words of President Barack Obama in eulogizing Jesse Jackson Sr., the audacity to dream and the courage to turn that dream into opportunity for every Caribbean citizen.
Thank you, Mr. Second Speaker, for the proposition. You spoke for 7 minutes and 15 seconds. I now invite to the podium our second speaker for the opposition to present her debate.
Good intentions alone are never enough to make good policy. I invite you to keep that line in mind because it perfectly captures the problem with today's moment. My colleague has already demonstrated that universal free tertiary education is financially unsustainable, poorly prioritized, and inequitable. My role as second speaker is to take you inside the system itself, beyond the numbers, beyond the promises, and show you what actually happens on the ground. Because, moderator, even if we set aside every dollar and every tax concern already proven, this policy will still collapse in practice. Tonight, I will show you 4 clear problems. Free tertiary education lowers educational quality, creates inefficiencies, weakens responsibility and commitment, and reduces the value of the very degrees students work so hard to earn. Let us begin with efficiency. Free does not just stretch resources, it clogs the system. Now, moderator, we all like free things. If someone says free food, we're all there. But education cannot operate like a giveaway. Yes, removal of tuition fees enhances access to higher education, with increased enrollment emerging as the most notable effect. However, challenges persist, particularly concerning student retention, degree completion rates, and equitable access across socioeconomic groups. It means classrooms will be filled, but graduation rates low. Resources spent, but outcomes weak. Universities working harder, but they are achieving less. But there is also something deeper at stake: responsibility. When students contribute even modestly, they take their studies seriously. They attend classes, they meet deadlines, they push through challenges because they have something invested. There is ownership. According to a 2021 report by the National Institute of Excellence in Teaching, it stated, and I quote, "When students own their learning, they take responsibility for their progress and success. Whereas if students don't own their learning, accelerating their learning will prove more difficult," end quote. The same research emphasizes that engagement alone is insufficient. When students have something invested in their education, that sense of ownership is strengthened. But when opportunities are entirely free and ownership is weak, missing class feels less serious, withdrawing feels easier, and the value of the opportunity can be taken for granted. After all, education is not about how many enter the building. It is about how many successfully walk out with a qualification. Quantity without outcomes is simply inefficiency. Moderator, education should empower independence and self-sufficiency, not reinforce reliance. Because the purpose of education is not to create dependence on government. It is to create capable, responsible citizens. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Moderator, when tuition is removed, enrollment rises. Of course it does. If something costs nothing, more people will take it. That's human nature. But what does not magically rise at the same time are classrooms, lecturers, laboratories, and equipment. Universities do not suddenly wake up with double the staff and triple the space. So what happens? Lecture halls become overcrowded. Students line up outside departments like it's registration week all semester long. Instead of meaningful engagement and mentorship, teaching becomes crowd control. According to a 2025 report posted by the US Department of Education, a study in South Africa on free tertiary education found that while free tertiary education increases enrollment, infrastructure and staffing do not expand at the same pace. The report stated, and I quote, "Free education has led to an increase in the number of students enrolled, but the expansion of infrastructural and human resources has not been enhanced correspondingly, thus lowering the quality of education," end quote. Moderator, I must ask, is that what we truly want for our citizens? More students on paper, but less education in reality? When tertiary enrollment expands faster than institutional capacity, educational quality declines because resources become overstretched. In a 2009 article published by UNESCO on the trends in global higher education, it was stated, and I quote, "The massification of higher education has created serious challenges for funding, quality assurance, and governance," end quote. So while enrollment numbers look impressive in a report, the actual learning experience quietly deteriorates because resources become overstretched. Moderator, access without quality is not opportunity, it is false hope. Now, let us step outside the classroom and look at the workforce. Consider what happens to the value of the degree itself. Imagine this. You buy a shirt. When enrollment expands dramatically, degrees lose their power to distinguish. Speaking at the UWI's Trade and Economic Development Unit panel discussion in 2026, Dr. Darren Conrad, head of Department of Economics at the University of the West Indies, outlined that 100% funding for university education has been contributing to labor market saturation, wage suppression, and growing frustration among highly qualified graduates who are unable to secure meaningful employment. What once opened doors now barely unlocks them. Increasing the number of degrees does not automatically increase opportunity or employability. And this reveals the government's greatest mistake. They confuse access with achievement. Simply opening the doors wider does not guarantee success. Success requires quality instruction, efficient systems, and relevant skills. I thank you.
The second speaker for the opposition presented her case in a time of 7 minutes and 7 seconds. Put your hands together again for both teams, Team Owali and Team Wadadley. Get it out of your systems. And so now, it is time that this has concluded the prepared presentations, and we will now have 5 minutes of silence for the debaters to prepare their rebuttals. The 5 minutes begin now. 5 minutes have expired, and so I invite the leader of the opposition to approach the lectern and present her rebuttal. Please welcome to the podium the leader of the opposition.
Moderator, esteemed judges, my worthy opponents, and members of our audience, good evening once again. As the proposition spoke, it sounded as if they were building a beautiful house. The problem, however, is that the foundation is weak. And no matter how attractive the house may look, if your foundation is beginning to crack, the entire structure will eventually collapse. The opposition will now expose the cracks in the proposition's arguments. Firstly, the proposition stated that free tertiary education breaks generational inequality. However, structural inequality is a tale as old as time. From Karl Marx's positive conflict theory to capitalism that we see around us today, equality requires broader reform than simply offering free tertiary education. In reality, universal free tertiary education often benefits middle and upper income families the most. As I stated in a study done by the Urban Institute, families from the top half of the income distribution receive 24% more in dollar value from eliminating tuition. Government funding then subsidizes individuals who could already afford tuition, including those who do not attend university. They end up paying the bill. That doesn't sound like equality to me. Moderator, free university for everyone often means the poor subsidizing for the rich. Let us not look at this from a perspective of equality, but equity. It boils down to a situation where no capable person is denied access to tertiary education due to lack of auxiliary funding. Education should be fair, but not free at all costs. Additionally, they stated that free tertiary education promotes development and workforce stability. Moderator, sustainable development requires balance between education and employment opportunity because jobs do not automatically increase because we offer more education. A 2026 UE panel discussion that we cited stated that free university leads to market saturation and wage suppression. When governments produce graduates faster than economies can absorb them, the result is not development. It is frustration, migration, and economic pressure. Picture this: 200 new accountant graduates, 10 available jobs. Can the proposition please tell us what will happen to those other 190 accountants? Additionally, as I quoted with the IMF, these qualified individuals find jobs in other economies, meaning our countries lose their return on their investments. Instead of providing free tertiary education, government should prioritize targeted approaches. For example, providing scholarships due to the needs of the workforce. Thirdly, the proposition stated that Antigua and Barbuda's government is implementing this policy. My grandmother once taught me that when people don't listen, you eat pepper, lime, and salt. I'm glad that my opponents mentioned this point because introducing a policy does not automatically prove that it is long-term successful. Responsible policy analysis requires examining sustainability, fiscal impact, and long-term outcomes rather than simply pointing to its existence. The mood emphasizes what should and should not be done. A country implementing a policy does not guarantee its success or its sustainability. As I stated with Trinidad and Barbados, this policy will not work. As Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. Does the proposition want insanity for our citizens? Moderator, Earlier, I spoke about the house that the proposition tried to build tonight. The opposition simply just checked the foundation, and the moment we did, the cracks began to show. Argument after argument shifted under the weight of scrutiny, because when the ground beneath you is weak, no structure will last long. As Winston Churchill said, however beautiful the strategy, you must always check your results. And moderator, after looking closely at the results of the proposition's arguments, one thing is undeniable. That house has already begun to fall. I thank you.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. She spoke for a duration of 5 minutes en punto. 5 minutes on the dot. And so now I turn to Team Nevis and I invite the Leader of the Proposition to present her rebuttal.
As a 19-year-old aspiring veterinarian, the arguments presented by the opposition resonates with me, but not in the way you might expect. Because they're suggesting that the access to tertiary education should depend not on ability or ambition, but simply on whether someone can afford it. Moderator, distinguished adjudicators, worthy opponents, colleague, good evening once again. Recently in my Caribbean Studies class, my teacher asked a simple question. How many students in this room may not be able to pursue tertiary education or further education because of financial barriers? A few hands slowly rose. Moderator, this was a personal experience for me because it reminded me that even one student is capable, or one student forced to abandon their dream because a cost is one lost opportunity for our region. And that is why I rise once again in support of the moot. Caribbean government should provide free tertiary education to citizens up to the undergraduate degree level. Moderator, allow me to dismantle our opposition's arguments and reveal how each crumbles under scrutiny. Firstly, brain drain they mentioned. They mentioned financial burdens on small economies and that monies should be invested into free education and monies invested in free education should be invested elsewhere. They mentioned that providing free tertiary education will place financial burdens on small Caribbean economies. Moderator, the first speaker of the opposition stated that small economies in small states, tertiary education will weaken institutions and put a strain on the economy. They also stated that it is unsustainable for Caribbean governments and they cannot afford such a burden. In addition, they mentioned every dollar should be spent wisely. Moderator, what is more wise than investing in your human capital in your own country? Moderator, the proposition acknowledged the competing financial obligations of the region's governments and the potential difficult choice that would have been made. However, we must put this issue into perspective. Governments investing in tertiary education, it is not simply a cost. It is an investment in human capital and national development. In my presentation, I shared the words of UWI Professor Canute Thompson, who stated that if citizens are to experience sustained improvement in their quality of life, governments must invest in more tertiary education. Dr. Thompson, as well as other professionals, such as Ms. Trudy Christian, acting president of Dominica State College, and government leaders, such as our Prime Minister, Honorable Terence Drew, and our opponent's Prime Minister, Honorable Gaston Brown shows that Caribbean governments already recognize that value of investing in their people. It is simply time for us to extend it across the region in a way that is feasible and strategic. Our opponents spoke about the dangers of increasing brain drain if Caribbean governments provide free tertiary educations to its citizens up to the undergraduate degree level. As I listened to the speaker, a thought occurred to me. Refusing to educate our people up to the undergraduate degree level does not stop brain drain. In fact, if I'm being honest, moderator, it creates something even worse, brain waste. And my second speaker explained, our framework includes service bonds, so graduates give back to their country or the region. The bases are covered. So instead of increasing brain drain, our approach actually reduces it, increasing the chances of brain drain for the Caribbean. So the real question, do governments risk a brain drain by waste by failing to offer free tertiary education to our citizens, or brain gain by offering free tertiary education up to the undergraduate degree level? At the beginning of my rebuttal, I spoke as a 19-year-old aspiring veterinarian. But this debate is not just about me. It is about the thousands of young Caribbean students whose potential should never be limited by the cost of education. May I remind you, moderator, that our people is our greatest competitive advantages. I thank you.
The leader of the proposition delivered her rebuttal in a time of 5 minutes and 6 seconds. Now this concludes our debate presentations, and we invite our adjudicators to retire in order to deliberate. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time when I must invite you to participate in the discussion. And I remind you of the moot this evening. Caribbean governments should provide free tertiary education up to the undergraduate degree level. I hope you'll be back shortly, those of you leaving, to join the discussion. Okay, so what are our thoughts? When I considered the moot, my mind meandered through our shared experience as once enslaved peoples, where education was totally restricted, and so social mobility was mostly restricted. Of course, there are other factors other than education that would contribute to social mobility. But for by and large, as an enslaved people, we were denied education. We moved into the colonial system, and a selected few were allowed some education. As we advanced and we became independent, primary and secondary education became free for our citizens. I think it's no coincidence that our society is developed exponentially with the introduction of primary and secondary education. And so is it then a natural progression towards offering free tertiary level education so that our population may keep up with the rest of the world? Please feel free to approach the mic and share your thoughts. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, moderator, for letting me come up to speak today. And I would like to congratulate the debaters. The debate was very good today. And I have a few points that I have prepared to speak. So I disagree with the moot. For it is not wise to make college free and not enforce on earlier forms of education. It's like leaving the most important part of a building, the structure, undone and perfecting the top.
Valid point.
Also, free tertiary education in small Caribbean economies and is not helping because college and university is very expensive. I will pressure them, making us pay more taxes.
Serious consideration.
Additionally, there would be many overcrowded sectors in universities and in the job market. And we need to work to improve high and primary schools first.
Valid points. Thank you, sir. Allow me to pose the consideration. Are we not already providing free tertiary level education? If I have 3 mangoes that my neighbor gave to me and I gifted one to Mrs. Lewis, haven't I provided her with a mango? I mentioned certain things in my profile to kind of highlight how much our Ministry of Human Resources does in offering access to free education, be it undergraduate or graduate level education, and several other means of equipping ourselves educationally. I traveled to Chile, compliments of the Chilean government, for 5 weeks as a Spanish teacher. I traveled to Taiwan and spent a year learning Mandarin. During COVID, they offered this young diplomats course from the Diplomatic Academy in Chile. We are providing access to higher level education. So what do you say to that? Do we need to do more than that? More than access to? I'm sure this is a very learned audience. I see a lot of persons here who can offer some valuable contributions. And I ask you please not to be shy, but to approach the mic and to give your input on the mood tonight. We're all looking at each other. Welcome, Mr. Otley.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, just first of all, I want to congratulate the debaters on an excellent presentation.
Yes.
Deserve a round of applause. Okay, this topic about free education, what I say, oppose, or I can't say I can oppose or support, because it depends on where it applies. Now, I can speak. I think the presentation somebody mentioned, one of the debaters mentioned about. Well, I studied in Barbados, and Barbados Barbados in general, they give free education. I think it was emphasized. There was a declaration by the Prime Minister Harold Barrow declare free education for Barbadians. Now, I spent a few years in Barbados. Some of them take it for granted, taking free education for granted. They do. And when I graduated from Payville in 2012, the Barbados government was owing about 150 million Barbados dollars to UE. 150 million Barbados dollars. And that was like about 3 years, from 2009 to 2012. I graduated in 2012. So they owed about 150 million Barbados dollars. And so things got so difficult that they had to actually stop it. I think the following year, if I'm not a year or two later, they think they had to actually end it. They had to end it. And then it so happened that and I was under the Democratic Labour Party government, which was under the then Prime Minister Francis Stewart, they had to end it. And then it so happened that when Mia Mottley came in as Prime Minister, that they resumed free education. But the question is, at what cost? Because if the government of Barbados was $150 million in arrears, and it was difficult for them to pay for that, how? And then Mia Mottley came back in and decided, okay, we're going to give free education. How are they going to manage that? How is that being managed? That has to be considered. How are they managing that? Have they dealt with it? Because I remember it was just about a few years ago during COVID, I think the Barbados government was asking for about some billions of dollars from the IMF, if I'm not mistaken. So you have to, those things are all things considered. Resources. How is that managed? You have to look at, that is the critical thing. How is it managed? You have to be wise in terms of how we fund. And I think that's where it goes. Because, Barbadians were thinking about, there was a discussion on Facebook around the time. One of my lecturers actually made a post about it, and I said, they got to feel us who are not Barbadians and who have to actually either take a student loan or we get, of course, our government would pay, our local government would pay government scholarship. But then a lot of them, all they had to pay was the other fees. The tuition is covered. The other fees ain't that much. And so it's like, now they have to be, it's like being a little more considerable about how we pay. So it's like now they're in our shoes. And so, those things are to be considered. Yeah, it's very important. So there's the good and there's the bad in all of that. It's just a matter of how is it being managed and how are you and your approach, or how serious you're taking the funding. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hartley. Mr. Premier.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I start by congratulating the debaters. I thought it was one of the most scintillating debates that I would have heard. I think both teams are excellent. I'm hoping that both teams win tonight. Having said that, I come from a place called Scarborough in Hanley's Road. And I stand here today as a Premier of Nevis and the product of tertiary education that was free. I think it's important sometimes because sometimes we get to this level and we kick down the ladder that we use to get to where we are. It's important that we remember from whence we have come and who and what would have assisted us to get to where we are. Now, I'm using my personal journey. When I got to high school, my family was a poor family. When I got to high school, I got a scholarship from Social Security. That allowed me to get through high school. It was supposed to end at 5th form. But when I got there, I did well, and they extended it to 6th form. When I was finished with 6th form, I got a scholarship from government to study law. And that allowed me to realize my dream of becoming a lawyer. After I had graduated as a lawyer, I got a further scholarship to do postgraduate work, and I went to England, to Oxford University. And that set me up to come back and to contribute. So I hear the arguments, and I understand the arguments, and it is true that we educate a lot of people for export. But having said that, we also educate a lot of people who come right back to the Caribbean to make their contribution. And I'm sure if I ask for a show of hands in here, a lot of you in here benefited from free education, and you're right in the Caribbean making your contribution. So that is why I say I thought the debate was so good, because the points on both sides were excellent. But something I didn't hear tonight that I expected to hear, it's an oft-repeated saying attributed to someone who was, I'm told, the president of Harvard. He said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And that is the truth, because education has been proven to be the only certain way out of poverty. It is the only way that we can lift a community, lift a society, and lift a country. And if that is a truism, it follows, therefore, that governments investing in education at all levels, is the best expenditure that we can make. And so it is true that in small islands especially, but truthfully in all countries, we have competing demands. And the case about the foundation being weak, and so the building can't stand, I thought that was well argued, well presented, but we can walk and chew gum. And it is very important that we continue to provide avenues and opportunities to ensure that our people at all levels have education. Otherwise, we will get back to what I think the proposition was saying, that only people who can afford will be able to get an education. And if that were the case, I might not have been here today in the position that I am in today. And many of us sitting down in this audience may not have been where we are today if we did not have that opportunity of free education. Whether it was provided by government, scholarships from donor agencies, or however we got it, many of us could not have achieved what we've achieved if we had to pay for it, because our families simply did not have the money to allow us to access tertiary education. And so I hope the judges come back tight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Mr. Hensley Daniel, welcome to the mic.
Good evening, everyone. I want to first begin by congratulating the debaters. I thought the opposition making the point about the need to strengthen the primary and secondary systems so that you have a larger pool of people to educate at that level. That was quite good. And then I think the seconder for the proposition arguing that, look, if you don't invest in education, you are going to spend a lot of money on rehabilitation programs. I think in the 2024-25 federal budget in St. Kitts and Nevis, they were spending 34% of the budget on rehabilitation programs, STEP and Elevate and all these things. And all of that is a reflection of the inadequate investment in the tertiary level. The arguments may seem to be something we have to address all the time. On one side, coming from the World Bank and the IMF, that education is a commodity. And over here, the argument, and using the Cuban example as a good example, that education is a right, and education must be part of the philosophy of government. And so I think that in a small country like ours, in order for us to be competitive, we have to broaden the access to education, not just at the tertiary level, but fix it at all levels so that we have enough people to help us to develop the country at the tertiary, by training at the tertiary level. I think also perhaps the debaters needed to share the differences in the investment in education in a country like Singapore, without resources the size of St. Lucia, and is one of the richest states in the world. And it has everything to do, or largely to do, with the investment in education. Also, in the countries like Denmark and Sweden and so on, investment in education. So I thought as we go forward, there's a competing view. Do we follow the IMF World Bank view that is a commodity, so only those who have the money can buy, or we say, look, this is philosophy, this is national development, we have to invest in education. I think for families who are struggling listening to the debate, they would like to back the proposition because they would think the proposition is speaking to them. And so I think this is a topic which continues to have currency because we need to make sure that if we advertise a job in Nevis and we have free movement of people, the people from Trinidad who now get free access to education, they are going to outcompete us. So that is where the work begins. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Valid point. While the others are coming, something that crossed my mind, the Premier said that education is the only way out of poverty. But the trend now is that success doesn't necessarily depend on a university degree. Everybody chasing the bag, right? And so the young people, their mindset might be changing to say they don't need a degree anymore. They want to chase the bag. And so we welcome the persons at the mic.
Good night. Okay, so I have, okay. So, good night, everybody.
Good night.
There's a couple of examples that I have here.
Sorry, we want to hear everything you have to say. Speak.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So, we could consider Chile during the 2013 presidential campaign. President Michelle Bachelet promised free tertiary education, but it was later scaled back because when they estimated the cost, it was around $3 billion US, which was not financially sustainable for them. Similar cases are Trinidad and Tobago and Escape Program, and Barbados and its UWI Cave Hill campus. Even in wealthier countries, similar challenges have emerged. Several Nordic countries such as Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, traditionally known for their free university tuition, have introduced tuition fees for international students due to public rising costs and concerns about economic return on government investment. So my question now is, why should Caribbean economies take on this financial burden when larger, more diversified economies have scaled back their tuition, the subsidizing of university tuition? Okay, you want to go ahead with it?
I would also like to add that Caribbean governments don't necessarily have the funds that they could allocate to free tertiary education because we have other priorities such as hurricane preparedness, and if these sectors have to be cut back, then we'd obviously be in a situation where we could be vulnerable, to say. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Continue.
We also face a structural challenge in the form of low tertiary enrollment and the migration of skilled graduates. Currently, less than 15% of Caribbean secondary school graduates proceed to university, and it is the lowest rate in the Western Hemisphere. At the same time, many graduates migrate abroad after completing their studies, seeking higher wages and better opportunities. Currently, I don't remember the exact study, but there is a 30 to 40% vacancy in nursing and teachers, and those are the persons that we need most. Our nurses are the people who take care of us when we're sick. Our teachers are the ones who educate the future generation of doctors, lawyers, teachers, technicians, IT specialists, so we need them most.
And also a lot of Caribbean students aren't necessarily pursuing degrees in fields that align with the Caribbean job market, so there's always going to be this mismatch, and there's always going to be this frustration, as one of the debaters would have said, in terms of finding employment. And also when we're looking at expanding tertiary education access, we have to focus on things such as the lecture halls, making sure that there's enough resources to go around for students.
Certainly.
And accreditation standards, because if one of the debaters also said this, that if we open access indiscriminately, the quality of free tertiary education goes down significantly.
Certainly. Good points, young ladies. You have more on your paper?
There's a lot here, but I'll cut it down.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So It was said that free tertiary education would reduce unemployment, as you stated. However, that correlation does not imply causation, particularly in Caribbean economies with limited capacity to
Raise your
absorb,
voice a little, please.
to absorb graduates into. I hear you bring in feedback.
There's some feedback. Can we get some technical assistance at the front?
Yes, please. I know. I can't hear it.
Continue, just
Okay.
speak into the mic clearly.
So, according to the ILO in its World Employment and Social Outlook Trends 2023, it highlighted that labor market demand and job creation, not education levels alone, are the primary drivers of unemployment outcomes. So it's not due to the fact that we don't have graduates or we don't have smart people, so to say, but we do not have the jobs required to support that.
To absorb.
So creating more graduates won't boost unemployment or anything like that.
Economic efficiency.
It would magnify that displacement, and it causes graduates to get frustrated and want to leave and be like, what's the point of even getting a tertiary education if you can't find a job after?
I would hope that tertiary education encourages more entrepreneurial endeavors, more than just expecting to get a job at the end of university.
I agree, but at the end of the day, not everybody could be an entrepreneur. Some people will have
to be employed.
work
We
for
understand,
others.
yes, that is true. That is true.
So, yeah. Free tuition alone does not create jobs, reduce poverty, or strengthen institutions. True progress lies in strategic investment, ensuring quality, aligning education with economic needs, and supporting those who benefit most. Free education, it can be useful, but it should be targeted.
Definitely.
Targeted towards people who low-income households, people who struggle with transportation or food insecurity, and it should be a difference because free tertiary education and scholarships and grants are totally different.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it first.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much for your contribution. And
Hello, good
we
night.
welcome another to the mic. Thank you.
I would just like to say that the concept of free education sounds nice, but I don't think it's sustainable at all. And also, something that was said before, somebody labeled scholarships as free education, and I don't think it should be labeled as free education because the simple process of getting a scholarship means that you desire to have the education and you must apply to get it. So the people investing in you they have hope that they're going to get a return on their investment because you want to do it. But I think the problem with free education is that it's non-excludable and non-exhaustible. So that means that for anybody, and people who use it without having to pay for it or give anything for it may not recognize the value of it and may just misuse it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The young man?
Good evening. I'll be brief. I would just like to point out that the UE has a program where contributing governments such as Jamaica and Antigua pay 80% of tuition costs, while students will pay the remaining 20%. And even under that program, Caribbean countries are still facing heavy debts. Like in total, I believe around $44 million is owed to the UE from these governments. So making it 100% would be very fiscally irresponsible. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a moment. The judges are waiting to return to their seat. We have more comments than time. But while the judges are being seated, you can go ahead and give your point.
I simply agree with free education. Number one, persons who cannot afford it can simply go and learn. Secondly, it also helps where students, it widens the opportunities where they can choose to go and study. Lastly, I also want to point out that it puts less mental stress because if you do not have the money, right, and you want to go to education, want to learn, to get a good job, it takes off stress, so I think it's much more easier.
Okay, thank you so much. Judges, can we take one more point? Okay.
I'll be brief. Good night, everyone. We just want to thank all the participants and all the hard workers. Now, I had to come because, like the Premier said, I'm a product of scholarships from secondary right to tertiary level. What I want to say, please, we have to, however, correct the disparity because there are opportunities available. However, sometimes, whether it is because of politics or other factors, I'll give you an example of what I mean. And this is at the heart of what is happening in our small island states. So for example, when I received a scholarship for the bachelor's degree, there were 10 scholarships available within the Federation. Of those 10, Nevis got 1, St. Kitts got 9. I have to thank the Deputy Governor General, the Honorable Hailita Leeward. Every time I see her, I am grateful that she located me. And so the next time I studied, there were 90 persons in the Federation who signed up for a master's program. And out of that 90, I was the only one from Nevis.
Thank you, thank you. All right, I threw that out there because I know I would get those sorts of responses that access to scholarships is not free education. All right, and that is what I wanted, is that sort of feedback. I'm seeing one, Ms. Napier is waiting to give, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that the adjudicators have returned, we will invite to the podium the judge who will give us the info. We invite the best speaker judge to the podium first.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Compliments on a job well done this evening. Compliments must be extended to the organizers of this competition. I think the standard was very high. Students, debaters, you could give yourself a pat on the back. You really came up to the standard, you delivered. And so you must be congratulated. Your staff sponsors for putting in the work, however long that work spanned, whether it was weeks or months. It's good when your hard work is, revealing results, and the results came in tonight. So thank you. Now to the individual debaters, the tasks that I was assigned, myself and my colleague. As you know, and I keep having to remind you each night, that our task is not to factor in the rebuttal performances, that our task is restricted to the prepared scripts. And so tonight we saw a major improvement in eye contact and familiarity with the script. There was good command of the material. There was an improved audibility and clarity in most cases. One or two instances, we had some challenges with audibility and clarity, but for the most part, I think it was good. Good voice modulation, and the arguments were persuasive on both sides. The debaters were very fluent because they had a good command of the material and eye contact that helped with their delivery. And certainly, added to the persuasive content of the performance. Again, I want to say that the debaters performed at a high caliber, and it might be because the moot is more applicable to your age group. So I can see where, much effort and emphasis was put into the performances. Either way, I think you would agree with me that there's nothing wrong with a free tertiary level education, even though you were opposing the moot. But you had your job to do, and so you had to deliver. In terms of the overall best speaker, I'm not going to be long-winded tonight. We are at the end, and we are tired, and we just want to get the results. So the overall best speaker as selected, the best speaker for this evening's debate, as selected by my colleague and I, is the opposition seconder. So, commiserations to Team Nevis. Your performances were good, but as you know, there can only be one best speaker. And so we have to, commend Antigua Seconder for her overall better performance. And now for the other moment you've been waiting for, we've been charged with also declaring who the overall best speaker of the entire competition. And this is strictly based on the points that have been inputted over the course of the weekend. And so that person is from Team Montserrat. And I do not want to mispronounce the speaker's name. Is it Etienne Udu? Very well. Congratulations to all the debaters.
Congratulations. I now invite Chief Prepared Presentation Judge to provide comments. Welcome her to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen and debaters, good evening. I promise that I won't be too long. I know we're all excited to hear the results of the culmination of this Leeward Islands debating competition. I will say that it has been an incredibly difficult task for us this evening as judges, and I would like to pause and just commend our debaters. As a teacher, I know how hard they would have worked, so let's please commend all of our debaters. As a debater myself in LIDC 2006, I know how much goes into organizing this. So I'd like to shout out the organizers, which is Nevis. Let's please give Nevis, our hosts, a big round of applause this evening. So my colleagues and I just have a few brief remarks before we will get to the final scores for this evening. We would like to comment that the level of discourse and the eloquence of the debaters was exceptional. The depth and the breadth of their research showed clearly through in their arguments, and the arguments were strong throughout. We noted from the outset that they both redefined their terms to suit the arguments, and that set up the audience to really start to think along their lines of thinking. We also noted that both sides developed their points very well, and that although they used referencing, one of the things that we would like to suggest for subsequent debates is that the use of references could have been more Caribbean specific and more current. So we would have liked to see some more referencing looking towards Caribbean specific sources and some more current referencing, and that's for our future debaters out there. The signposting, as I mentioned, was excellent, and the laying out of the arguments. We saw, however, and I think that point was mentioned in the conversation before we came out, that there were a few areas that were not mentioned. First of all, that governments do contribute to UE up to 80%, and so we thought that we would have liked to hear that come out in the debates. We also heard mention of some of our colleges, like our state colleges. However, we do have to remember that the MOOT was speaking to tertiary education up to the bachelor's level. So a lot of our state colleges are providing up to the associate's degree, but not up to the bachelor's level. We did note, however, that these debates were extremely strong because they brought up some key issues. And that is the fact of the limited resources of our governments, the government priority areas, and the level of dependence that we as citizens can have on the government. We also saw both sides speaking to the issue of brain drain, and that issue versus the need to develop our human resource as a people. We saw the issues of job creations come up, and that job creation versus labor market saturation. And then we also saw both sides speaking about the quantity of degrees as opposed to the outcome. And that speaks to the efficiency or inefficiency. So in concluding, I do want to remind you that in adjudicating, we were looking for the most convincing and effective arguments. We didn't just look at the number of points, but the development of those points, the evidence that supported those points, and the linkages that were made throughout the speakers and the speakers with their seconders. We also were looking at the way that they best use that limited time. We did note that in the rebuttal, there was some quotation of the other side, but there could have been a deeper analysis of some of the points. So rather than just restating the points, analyzing the points a little bit more in depth. However, overall, we have to conclude that this was an extremely high level of debate from both teams. Again, we would like to commend them, but we do know that there can only be one winner this evening. The judges were all in agreement, and so I will read out the points, and then I will indicate which side would have amassed those points. So one of our sides would have amassed a total of 639 points, and another side would have amassed a total of 694 points. So, ladies and gentlemen, students, without further ado, I would like to announce the winners of this year's Leeward Islands debating competition. And amassing a total of 694 points, we have the opposition Antigua.
Congratulations, reigning champion. Congratulations to Team Antigua, Team Wadadley. Please join me in congratulating both teams. They did an excellent job. I now invite, we've already exchanged our congratulations? Yeah. Okay, thank you. As we bring tonight's exciting round of debates to a close, we extend sincere thanks to our debaters, adjudicators, moderators, timekeepers, organizers, sponsors, and you, our wonderful audience, for making this evening very memorable. Your continued support helps to nurture critical thinking, confident expression, and meaningful dialogue among our young people. I encourage everyone to remain with us as we transition now to the closing ceremony. Thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, as she said, we are about to transition. We're going to close the curtains. Just give us a few minutes as we change over. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin. We ask everyone to settle in. If you can hear my voice on the outside, you're welcome, invited to come on back on the inside, but we are getting ready to begin. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols having been established earlier, we will now transition into the closing ceremony of the 54th Leeward Islands Debating Competition. We will begin by inviting the president of the Nevis Literary and Debating Society, Mr. Nevroy Manners, to deliver the closing remarks.
Good evening. As we draw the curtains on the 54th Leeward Island Debating Competitions, it is fitting that we pause, not just to celebrate what happened on this stage this week, but to reflect on what this competition truly represents. For over 50 years, the Leeward Island Debating Competition has brought together the brightest young minds from across the waters that separate our territories. They came together united by the power of ideas. That vision belonged to one man, Dr. J.A. George Irish, a Montessorian scholar, author, and educator who founded this competition in 1972. Though he passed away in 2019, his legacy lives on in every debater who has ever stood on an LIDC stage. We have witnessed passion, preparation, and courage. We have seen debaters stand before the audience and defend positions with confidence and conviction. We have watched young people grow before our eyes, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what LIDC truly is about. To our debaters, the scores will be forgotten long before the experience is. What you have gained this past week is friendship, discipline, and confidence, which will remain with you after you leave these shores. On behalf of the Nevis Literary and Debating Society, congratulations to all the competing territories. It has been a privilege to serve as the host for the 54th Leeward Island Debating Competition. We wish each team a safe journey to their respective islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nevroy Manners, for the reflective and fitting words to close out what has truly been memorable competition. We will now move into what is perhaps the most anticipated moment of the evening, the presentation of the awards. We invite the representative from the Ministry of Education to come forward to assist with the presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation as we celebrate the achievements of our debaters. Please note that the participation awards will be given out at the banquet later tonight at the Four Seasons.
I would now like to invite Ms. Zanella Claxton, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Education et al., to give out the awards for the winner of each debate night. So our winner for debate 1 was Montserrat with 610 points. I would kindly ask a representative from the debate team to collect their award. The winner from debate 2 was Anguilla with 657 points. The winner for debate 3 was Antigua with 691 points. The winner of debate 4 was Nevis with 613 points. And the winner of tonight's debate, the finals, Team Antigua with 694 points. Thank you, Ms. Claxton. I would now like to invite the Honorable Hugh Troy Liburd, Minister of Education et al., to make the presentation for the best speaker of each night, as well as the overall best speaker.
Winner of Best Speaker from the first debate, I would like to ask Mr. Etienne Udo from Montserrat, amassing a score of 179 points. The winner of Best Speaker from the debate 2 goes to the propositions leader of Anguilla, Miss Abigail Campbell, amassing a total of 167.5 points. The winner of debate 3's best speaker goes to Antigua's opposition leader, Miss Amaya Jenes, amassing a total of 175.5 points. The winner of debate 4's best speaker goes to the opposition seconder of Team Nevis, Mr. Kijari Huggins, amassing a total of 164.5 points.
The best speaker for tonight's debate goes to Antigua's opposition seconder, Janika Adams, amassing a total of 173 points. Now for the highly anticipated overall Best Speaker. That prestigious title goes to Montserrat's opposition seconder, Etienne Udo. We'd like to thank Mr. Leeward for ably assisting in the presentation of the awards.
I would now like to invite the Honorable Mark A.G. Brantley, Premier of Nevis, to distribute the first runner-up and winner trophies. I would now like to invite Team Nevis to collect the first runner-up trophy. And last but not least, I would like to invite a representative from Team Antigua to collect the winners, the entire team to collect the winning trophy. Let's give them a round of applause. I would like to thank Mr. Hanley of Malcolm's Revolutionary Designs, sponsor for this championship LIDC 54 trophy, and the Premier for distributing the award. I would like to also ask the Honorable Brantley to present the championship plaque to Team Antigua.
The entire team can come, as well as staff sponsors.
And we would like to thank the Honorable Mr. Mark Brantley for the distribution of the winning trophy and the plaque.
Congratulations once again to all of our recipients. Every debater who took to the stage this week has already won something that no trophy can measure: courage, experience, and the memory of representing their territory on the LIDC stage.
We are almost at the close of this evening's program. We will now invite Chevanie Daniel and Mr. Kenayo Challenger to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is our honor to extend heartfelt gratitude to our sponsors and other individuals who helped make the 54th edition of the Leeward Islands Debating Competition successful.
First and foremost, we must express gratitude to the Almighty God, whose guidance and grace carried us safely throughout this week.
To our platinum sponsors, the Nevis Island Administration, Ministry of Education, and the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Our golden sponsor, Merchant Legal Chamber.
Our silver sponsors, Joseph Rao Legal Chambers, the Bank of Nevis Limited, SL Hosfors Nevis Limited, and the St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank.
Our bronze sponsors, the Finnish Touch Limited, International Merchant Bank Limited, Claxton Service Limited, and National Caribbean Insurance.
And to the individuals who responded to our calls for sponsorship, Ms. Hazel Manners David, Mr. Jamal Daniel, Ms. Sheila Huggins, and Ms. Desana Daly. And to those who prefer to remain anonymous, we are truly grateful for your generosity, which shows your commitment to the growth and development of young persons who are our future leaders.
Thank you to the businesses and individuals who would have partnered with us to provide services, whether free or significantly discounted. The management and staff of PKF, St. Kitts and Nevis, for providing free auditing services for LIDC 54. The management and staff of the Four Seasons Resort Nevis, the Hamilton Villas and Spa, Mount Nevis Hotel, Islanders Water Sport, Tropical Blossom Nursery, Cornerstone, and Malcolm's Revolutionary Designs.
The Nevis Literary and Debating Society executed numerous fundraising events throughout the 2025-2026 academic year. Thank you to all parents, businesses, and individuals who contributed.
A heartfelt thank you to the Steering and Planning Committee for LIDC 54, who always went above and beyond of call duty to ensure that all events for LIDC 54 were successful, memorable, and safe. Thank you to the staff at the Department of Education, especially our bus drivers, who have become family to the team they were assigned to.
Gratitude must also be expressed to Ms. Niall Daniel and the principal, staff, and students at the Charlestown Secondary School, the Gingerland Secondary School, and the various primary schools for their involvement and participation, especially the organization of the combined choir and the cultural dancers for the Nevis Nice production at the opening ceremony.
This competition would not have been as memorable without the participation of the visiting teams. Thank you to the staff sponsors, debaters, and supporters for trusting Nevis to host LIDC 54. We enjoyed 5 days of riveting debates due to your hard work and dedication, and commitment, and of course of fun social activities that were even more memorable because of your presence.
Thank you to the management and staff of the Nevis Performing Arts Center, the director and staff of the Information Technology Department, the Nevis Cultural Development Foundation, Mr. Leeward Jr. Paris, the director and staff of Nevis Television, and our other media platforms.
To you, the listening and viewing audience, thank you for joining us nightly for the debates. Your presence and support truly meant a lot to us.
And if by chance we overlooked anyone, it was not intentional. We are truly appreciative of your support, dedication, and generosity that helped Team Nevis to successfully host LIDC 54. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Ms. Daniel Challenger. On behalf of the organizing committee, the principal, staff, of the Charlestown Secondary School, and of the Nevis Sixth Form College, and the entire island of Nevis, thank you for being part of LIBC 54. To our visiting delegations, we hope you leave Nevis with warm memories, new friendships, and a piece of Nevis in your heart. To those